No, I have to say, I always thought that the national poverty line was more of a political construct, right? Designed for politicians to say we've made progress, right? When they never really truly changed lives. Oh, the poverty line is here, and you're making a grand more. We've done you a big favor. Vote for me. Well, my next guest has taken this whole proposition to a whole new level, and everyone has a strong opinion about his Substack titled How a Broken Benchmark Quietly Brought America Down. Let's bring in now Simplify Asset Management, their chief strategist, Mike Green. My man. Golly, people are going nuts. First, I just want the idea of what made you even go down this rabbit hole.
Well, what actually sent me down this, we'd actually talked about a couple of the pieces that I've done before on this, where I was just candidly horrified by the reaction that we saw on Twitter to a right-wing influencer posting a somewhat inaccurate picture of a house saying in 1950 a single income could afford this, right? There was an incredibly coordinated and messaging backlash that basically boiled down to what possible right do you have to expect this? You're nothing, right? That framework ultimately sent me down a path of saying, hey, wait a second, this is actually really missing something that people are trying to convey. And as I dug into the numbers, and I wrote this on my piece, I was candidly horrified, because as somebody who comes out of the financial world, who has done very well and is incredibly appreciative for it, and whose children have been successful,
right?
I look at this and I'm like, this is something I never really spent a lot of time thinking about.
Right.
But the minute you dig into it, you discover that there's actually a terrible story out there.
So maybe you were living in an ivory tower and didn't know it?
I absolutely knew I was living in an ivory tower. My life is like, very few people have this.
The real math of survival, though. So we're talking about real survival, real poverty line. Child care, $32,000. Housing, $23,000. Food, almost $15,000. Transportation, almost $15,000. Health care, almost $11,000. Other essentials, $22,000. Add in taxes. You're saying the real poverty line is $140,000, essentially.
It is very close. And I want to just be clear that
$140,000 a year is where the real poverty line is. Come on, man. Come on, man. Come on. I'm curious to see where these numbers come from, where they break down. Obviously, you guys have to take into account that everywhere is different. Cost of living in Texas is not going to be the same as in California. The cost of living in California is not going to be the same as Florida. There are certain states that have income tax. In Georgia, 5.5% income tax on all income for the state. You got some states, again, like Nevada, no income tax at all, so it all fluctuates. But to say for the United States of America, the real poverty line in general is $140,000 a year, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it, right? I'm really not buying that. So let's break this down and see, where these numbers come from.
$1,000 doesn't mean you are literally poor, right? We're not talking about, country poor sort of stuff. What I'm describing there is that's really the threshold at which you can cover all of the expenses without government assistance and start saving, right? Start preparing for your future. That's a very, very different place than most people think it is.
Now, obviously, people hit you.
And I'm going to just go on a whim and say that these numbers probably come from people that don't have any type of financial discipline. They get in a whole bunch of credit card debt, student loan debt, car loan debt, ultimately getting mortgages that they can't afford. I always preach like, look, man, you never want to go in and say, I want to put the least amount of money down on a home, right? Everybody's preaching FHA, 3%, 3.5%, 5% down, and then wonder why your mortgage is just as much as it would be to rent. No, you got to actually put some skin in the game. You got to have discipline. You got to save money over years, just depending on people's situation. You might be able to save up money in 6 months for a down payment on a home. But you do not need to make $140,000 a year to be able to start comfortably saving, or whatever he said. You got to make more than $140,000 a year to be able to start comfortably saving. As a single, living on my own, and even the stuff that's settled through my business, I'm an S Corp. I pay myself a reasonable salary. And I'm gonna be honest, you can get more money from your business if you choose to, but from tax purposes, right? That's the most tax efficient way to go about things is, S Corp, you pay yourself an amount of salary. And then if you want to take on distributions at the end of the year, then obviously you don't have to pay self-employment taxes, but that's just a whole nother conversation, right? But I don't even on salary on paper. I don't even pay myself $140,000 a year, and I'm still able to pay my mortgage. I'm still able to travel. I'm still able to go out in Atlanta at that, and I'm still able to fund my Roth IRAs. I'm still able to fund my other brokerage accounts. I'm still able to fund my savings account. Why? I have minimal debt. To be honest, the only debt I have is my mortgage outside of business debt, right? I'm an advocate of debt if it's going to make you money. If the rate of return is going to be higher on the actual debt the business you're acquiring, you're taking on is making you more money, then yes, I'm an advocate. Just be smart with your leverage. But $140,000 a year household income, I'm thinking even if you have a child, right? You have one kid or two, $140,000 a year would come out to be, let's say, a smooth 100,000 or maybe a little bit less than 100,000 after taxes. You still should be able to make that work, but I think it's subjective on lifestyle.
And you talked about this a little bit in the piece that, hey, it's a lot different in Mississippi than it is in Manhattan.
It's a lot different in Mississippi, and what's been so interesting to me is actually the anger and frustration and resentment of that number is typically coming from people who don't have kids. Right? I see a lot of young, informed, intelligent commentators like, this is absolutely ridiculous, $32,000 for childcare. And in the meantime, the vast majority of my comments that are coming in are from people who are actually in that situation saying you're 100% right. This is exactly my experience.
The lies, the housing lie, the hedonic lie. What's the housing lie?
Well, the story with the housing lie is this idea that you can afford to buy this house if you just be willing to settle. And this goes back to the piece that I wrote before. An individual had said, look, the problem is everybody expects larger houses today. They expect nicer houses today. Well, the reality is they expected that in 1955 as well. The homes that were being built at 1,100 to 1,200 square foot at that time period were dramatic improvements. Many people are now out saying 20% of the homes in 1950 didn't have indoor plumbing. 0% of the new houses in 1950 didn't have indoor plumbing. They were all being brought up to standards of the day. If you look at that exact same house today, it is nowhere near affordable. It is impossible for most families in a place like Essex County, New Jersey, which is the area that I was responding to.
New Jersey is expensive.
They just can't afford it. There's nothing there for them.
The optical illusion of.
And I do want to touch on the childcare piece as well, right? And I think it's ultimately because we guys, we're not in a day of age where we're living in traditional households, right? Again, I grew up in a time where my dad was a primary breadwinner. He was a primary breadwinner. He paid all of the bills. My mom took care of me and my sister growing up until we were able to obviously go and start pre-K, kindergarten, first grade on and up, right? And then that's when my mom then went and pursued her career and got higher education and things of that nature, right? But if we actually break down the math and, again, it's depending on where you live, $32,000 a year for childcare is a lot. So you have to think about it. Let's just say the man is making about $60,000 a year. And if you're a woman and you're making like 35 to 40, does it really make sense for you to work just to give most of it to childcare? I don't think so, right? And that's where you actually really have to break down the math and start analyzing, like, okay, on top of that, I don't know how everybody else feels about it, but do you ultimately want other people to instill their values in your child? Yeah, you can control that to a degree with wherever you put them at, right? For daycare, but ultimately, there's no better feeling than actually knowing that your child is learning under your roof, your principles, whatever you want to instill with them. You know what's going on at all times of the day, right? And that's just a peace of mind that I personally will want to have. As far as the housing crisis, he's right. Housing is unaffordable, right? The average home values today across America is about $440,000. That may get you anywhere between 2,000 and 3,000 square feet. And he's right. When we're talking about the whole down payment thing, like I talk about, I'm an advocate of 20% down on a $400,000 house. Obviously, that's a large chunk of change. The average American, it might take them 2-3 years to save that money if they have no other debt, if potentially they have no other kids as well. So I do sympathize for that. But ultimately, still, $140,000, you can make that swing. I'm not buying it.
prosperity. What's that about?
Well, we absolutely have progressed as a society,
Right.
right? I'm sitting on this stage wearing very nice clothes and warm air conditioned or warm HVAC serviced environment. My life is dramatically richer and better than my grandfather's life was. But the reality is that base level of participation, the level at which I can start to contribute and start to benefit from how society has improved, has risen alongside that.
One of my favorite guests, really great thinker, Colin Roach, responded. And then you responded to his response, and you said, "There's never been a better time to be born into human existence than this very instant."
That is true.
And
oh my
time
God.
is the next instance, right? On this we agree.
That is so true.
But is that really true anymore? I mean, that was always, it always felt.
Look, man, and this is what pisses me off. Man or woman, y'all keep making excuses of what we don't have, how housing, food, everything was significantly cheaper back in the 40s, 50s, 60s. But you guys have to also understand the wages were a lot cheaper too. Like a movie ticket back in 1950, 1960 was 5 cents, right? But you would be lucky if you were even making like $25,000 a year, just the average American. So we have to understand where we are. And to what he said, yeah, man, opportunities in 2025 are mind-blowing. They're mind-blowing. Like our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, especially if you are a minority, they didn't have the opportunities that we do today. Social media has changed people's lives tremendously, right? The information is out there. You can't say you don't have the knowledge. You can't say you can't go find the knowledge to make your life better. The reason why majority of the people will always stay stagnant on where they are is because they're afraid to put in the work. Everybody wants to keep up with the Joneses, no pun intended, but they're not willing to put in the work. And that's why they'll stay stagnant and they'll stay where they're at. People are lazy, man. And I had to understand at a certain point, I cut those people out of my life. You ever got that person that's always saying, what they gonna do, what they gonna do, what they gonna do? A year go by, 2 years go by, 3 years go by. It's like, no, man, you actually gotta, you gotta go out there, man. You gotta take that risk. And ultimately, if there's no risk, there's no rewards. You guys let me know what you think in the comments. I appreciate you guys for continuing to rock with me. Again, not buying it, but he do got some valid points there. Again, I appreciate you guys. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.